Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Episode number 42 of our series, Muhammad, the Man Who Changed the World. In our last episode, we were in the middle of what is called the Battle of Mu'tah. Mu'tah is a place in Jordan, or as was described in the books of history, Jayshul Umara, the Battle of the Generals, where the Prophet ﷺ sent an expedition of 3,000 men against the Ghassanid tribes. The Ghassanid were Christian Arab tribes living in North Arabia, after assassinating one of the Sahaba who had come to deliver a message from him. And so the army of the Muslims entered the Ghassanids. The Ghassanids were allied with the Romans, and the enemy was a lot bigger than the Muslims expected. And so a major confrontation occurs that the Muslims did not expect. And in this confrontation, the three generals appointed the Prophet ﷺ, Zayd, Ja'far, and Abdullah ibn Rawaha, all three of them are martyred, and the army is without a leader. The Prophet was not part of this battle, but he was in Medina explaining in live detail what is going on. And so in Mu'tah, the Muslims are completely, in disarray. The leadership was taken out. They don't know what to do. The enemy is overwhelming them. They are on the verge of collapse, and they don't know who to give the flag to, and they manage to secure the flag. And the guy holding it, Thabit radiallahu anh, says, guys, Muslims, agree on a commander quickly. Someone take the flag from me. He doesn't want to hold the flag. And everyone's eyes fall on Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anh, basically the newest Muslim, the newest convert in the masjid. And imagine in the masjid, who must be the imam? The new guy. Everyone says, you go and you be in charge. Khalid says, how can I'm not fit, I'm not ready. He gives all the excuses, but the flag is basically thrust into his hand, and he immediately takes charge of the army. And so what he does is, subhanAllah, he looks at the situation, he reorganizes the army. So what happens is, once the army breaks and it runs, it is even more vulnerable. So in old warfare, you're even more vulnerable of being killed from behind if you break and run. And so he manages to secure the lines, get the shape of the army in order, and instead of defending, he has an audacious strategy of counter-attacking. And so as the enemy is expecting the Muslims to fall apart, they lost their generals, they go on an extreme counter-attack. And this would be Khalid bin Walid's, one of his signature moves in battle, is he would form a core group of fighters, the very, very best elite legion of the army, and he would always lead this elite unit like a hero or a legendary unit, and they would go deep into enemy territory, inflict a lot of damage, and he would be at the tip of the spear. And so he would love this kind of strategy. The rest of the army is pushing back, and he would go on the offensive. And during this battle, it's well known, he took many personal injuries, but 9 of his swords broke. Now, subhanAllah, it sounds, it is legendary, but it be well known, Khalid would repeat this a lot, that this was the most difficult campaign of his life, where he lost 9 swords. Now, if you're fighting to such an extent where 9 of your swords break, it shows you the ferocity of the battle. And with that extreme initial resurgence of the Muslims, the Romans were taken aback and they kind of disengage. And so in the evening, the two armies break. So the Romans were on the verge of overrunning the Muslims, but with this brief counter-attack, the Romans disengaged quickly and thought, okay, fine, we got them on the ropes. We couldn't give them a knockout punch, but tomorrow we'll give them a knockout punch. And so during the evening, Khalid radiallahu anh, he instructed the army to light many fires, more than they needed. He also instructed the cavalry to run through the desert and to use logs and move, to create a lot of commotion and a lot of noise, and make it appear that the Muslims are being reinforced. So the Romans are sitting there listening to seeing these fires growing and growing. More fires are being lit, throughout the night. More people are more movement through the desert. The dust is being kicked up. They hear the movements. So in their mind, the Muslims are being reinforced by another contingent. And so the previous day was intense, and the Romans were quite surprised at the number and the ferocity of the Muslim counterattack. Even when they were supposed to break, they didn't break. The Muslims were fighting to the death. Now, when you fight anyone, like in a fist fight, and that guy is going toe to toe to the death, it gives you a bit of pause. And so he also managed to alternate his battalions. Now, when you play sports, you tend to mark your opposite number, and you get to know your opponent, and so you recognize the faces. And he managed to sort of swap over his battalions, and so the Romans would assume that it's new faces, new people. When the next day came on, the battle continued. It was intense. It was hard. Both sides are slugging it out. But eventually Khalid realized that the enemy was just way too big, and a lot of the damage had already been done in day one. He needs to disengage in the most strategic way possible. And so while the battle is going, he disengages his army. The Romans themselves are also keen to disengage, and so the two armies separate without either retreating, and you could really say it's a draw. Both sides were keen to stop fighting, and the Muslims melt away into the desert. The Romans are not going to chase them into the desert. It's another very Khalid's signature move is that he would fight close to the desert, and he would, when things becomes tough, his cavalry, his army would quickly, very, very mobile kind of warfare, not a lot of armor, not a lot of packing up, not a lot of logistics. You quickly in, quickly out. So if the battle goes sour, you can retreat and move into the desert. And if the enemy wants to chase you into the desert, well, the Arabs are the masters of the desert. You're fighting on their terrain, on their turf, and you're not going to be able to win in the desert. And so the Muslims are able to secure a strategic defeat. And one can really say that that Khalid radiallahu anhu, with the grace of Allah, manages to rescue the Muslims from the verge of defeat. And the Romans decided not to pursue them, and now the Muslims return home. And this would perhaps be, since the Battle of Uhud, the most difficult battle for the Muslims, and in the eyes of some, this would have been a defeat. The Muslims never left a battlefield like this. And so when they entered Medina, some of the people said, "Oh, you people that have fled, you've left jihad, you've turned your backs on Allah, you have fled from the way of Allah." They are being rebuked. The army is being criticized as they enter Medina, and that you should have died on the battlefield, you should have died like Zayd, you should have died like Ja'far. And when the Prophet ﷺ hears this, he makes an announcement. He said, and this is a hadith in Sahih Bukhari, he said, Zayd took the flag as the commander of the army, and he was martyred. Then Ja'far took it and was martyred. And then Ibn al-Rawaha took it and was martyred. Then the flag was taken by a sayf min suyufillah, a sword from the swords of Allah. That's why Khalid's nickname, the sword of God, the sword of Allah, this is where he got it from. It wasn't a title that was given to him by anyone other than Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So the Prophet says, then the flag was picked up by a sword of amongst the swords of Allah, and through him Allah made the Muslims victorious. They have not fled, but they have returned to fight again if Allah wills. So it was a strategic retreat. They will fight again, and really indeed, if you were to speak about the campaigns of Khalid and Walid in the time of Abu Bakr and Umar, truly he will return to this lands, and he will conquer, the land of Syria, the land of Palestine, the land of Jordan. All these territories would fall under Islamic domain, by and large, by the amazing campaigns of Khalid and Walid radiallahu anh in the time of Abu Bakr and Umar. May Allah be pleased with him. And so this is where Khalid gets his name. And interesting, the sword of Allah. So Allah, Allah Azza wa Jalla, Allah Almighty, He does of course not need weapons, but Allah's weapons and His instruments are not machines or tools, but people. And so the Prophet says, Khalid is a sword min suyufillah, the sword amongst other swords. And so there are others who are swords of Allah. And once you have this title of sword of Allah, defeat, it almost becomes impossible to defeat you. And the victories that Khalid would achieve through the grace of Allah would become so miraculous that even the enemies later on would say, have you really gotten a sword from Allah? There's a discussion between Khalid and a general amongst the Romans. This is now 5-6 years in the future. And the general says, we heard that you have a sword from God that makes you invincible. And Khalid says, no, I was not given a sword from God, rather I am the sword of God. I was given that title by the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So this battle occurred in the 8th year after Hijrah, in the month of Jamad al-Ula. one of the things that also was quite tragic, as we said, the death of Ja'far was a very, very hard thing for the Muslims. And in fact, Ja'far's own family was as we said, they were quite hysterical. And in this, he had a young family, his wife, and Ja'far and Asma bint Umays, they had a very deep bond. And again, they are that type of couples who grew up together. They were married, they were, always connected to each other. They made the hijrah to Abyssinia, they lived 15 years, and now they come to Medina, and now Ja'far is martyred, and Asma is unconsolable. And she actually goes to the point where, as Muslims, when you are afflicted with a calamity, sickness or death or whatever it is, you can cry. You obviously should feel sad, but there are certain type of wailing and type of lamentation which is not permissible. You can't scream and shout and tear your clothes and say anything that shows displeasure to Allah. And out of the grief, Asma said a few things, and someone comes and complains. Right? So just imagine this. The Prophet is crying. Just the wisdom of this. The Prophet is sitting there, he's in tears, he's crying because he's like brother, his son has passed away. Zayd and Ja'far has passed away. And the man comes and says, Ya Rasulullah, Asma, the wife of Ja'far, is screaming and she's shouting, and he's in pain. And so the Prophet says, say to them just like he says, speak to them, they shouldn't do that. They shouldn't do that. And he goes and the family still continues. Then he comes back and says, Ya Rasulullah, they're not listening to me. And the Prophet is like, just tell them to fear Allah or whatever. The Prophet brushes it off. And as he goes, Aisha shouts at this man and says, you should be reprimanded. And she's saying, where's your wisdom? You can see the Prophet is broken. Asma is broken. Now it's not the time to be giving bayans and giving, there are bigger things to worry about. Afterwards, after, the emotions have calmed down, then you can talk. And so so Aisha rebukes this man. And again, mashallah, shows our mother Aisha. She sees her husband in tears. Her husband is devastated. And this man coming to ask trivial questions now is not the time for these trivial questions. And so she, shows her love, her passion. Again, our mother Aisha radiallahu anha, her personality. And so in fact, what would happen is eventually Asma bin Umays would eventually marry Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So a few months later or a year or so later, Abu Bakr would marry Asma bint Umays, and she would actually give birth to a son from Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And when Abu Bakr would pass away, it would be this lady Asma that would ghusl Abu Bakr many years later. Alhamdulillah. So interesting relationship there. So this is the battle between the Muslims and the Romans or the Ghassanids. And so effectively the Muslims are at war with the Ghassanids. And keep this in mind, while the rest of the Seerah continues and there's nothing really happening between the Muslims and the Ghassanids, there is this overarching threat that the Ghassanids and the Muslims are at war. Now that the Quraysh, there was peace with the Quraysh, there's peace with the neighboring tribes. The actual front line is the north of Medina now. And at any time, the Ghassanids, there is this risk, the Ghassanids could invade at any time. And we'll talk more about this as we get towards the end of the Seerah. But before, things happen on the northern frontier, something, a path would open in the south with the Quraysh that was unexpected. A few months, we are now, remember, between the Muslims and the Quraysh, there is the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. 2 years have basically gone by, or a year and a half, where the Muslims and the Quraysh are at peace. There's no fighting between them. The Muslims came for their Umrah the following year. And also part of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was that whoever joins the Muslims will automatically fall under the treaty. And whoever joins the Quraysh will automatically fall under the treaty. So the allies of the Muslims will be protected and the allies of the Quraysh will be protected. And a few months after the Battle of Mu'tah, two minor tribes go to war with each other, or not really go to war with each other. There's two tribes. The one tribe is, don't get confused with the names. There's a tribe called the Banu Bakr. The Banu Bakr joined the Quraysh. They are allies of the Quraysh. And the Khuza'a are allies of the Muslims. The Khuza'a, by the way, are not Muslim. The Khuza'a are non-Muslims, but they joined the Muslims. Why? Because the Banu Bakr is their arch enemy. So, side note, before Islam, before the coming of the Nabi Sallam, these two tribes, the Banu Bakr and the Khuza'a, were at war. Then Islam comes and they kind of stop fighting. Now that there's a Treaty of Hudaybiyah, the Banu Bakr joined the Quraysh. And with the Quraysh now no longer fighting the Muslims, the Muslim issue off the table, the Banu Bakr and the Khuza'a go back to their old rivalry. And so because the Banu Bakr joined the Quraysh, the Khuza'a felt we need to have an ally, and they allied with the Muslims, and the Prophet ﷺ took them as an ally, even though they were not Muslim. And so the Khuza'a are an ally of the Muslims, the Banu Bakr are an ally of the Quraysh. And now that hostilities kind of ended between the Muslims and the Quraysh, the Banu Bakr went back to their old grievance with the Khuza'a, and they invaded the Khuza'a in Sha'ban, the 8th year of the Hijrah. And the Banu Bakr attacked the Khuza'a unexpectedly. They entered their territory. They basically massacred many members of the tribe. They killed women, even to the extent where the Khuza'a, because these tribes live around Mecca, they're not by Medina. The Khuza'a, some of them ran into the Haram for protection, and they were killed in the Haram of Mecca. And so the Khuza'a were completely, outraged at this killing of the tribesmen, and this fighting that happened also at night. This was a surprise attack. It happened at night. It happened in the sacred lands of Mecca. And so the leader of the Khuza'a, he goes to the Nabi Sallam to petition and says, "You are my ally. We were invaded. We were brutally killed. We, without any kind of provocation, we didn't do anything to Banu Bakr. They sort of took up a grievance of 20, 30 years ago, and they attacked us and they killed us indiscriminately. They even killed some of our people in the Haram area. And you are our ally. What will you do? You need to help us." The Prophet, peace be upon him, he Allah be pleased with he acknowledges that he will help the Khuza'a, and he he informs the Quraysh that this was a breach of Hudaybiyah, and we give you three options. O Quraysh, you have three options. So the Prophet now steps in. You killed, and your ally attacked my ally, and now you will need to deal with the consequences. And you have three options. Option one, you personally, Quraysh, will have to pay retribution for every person that was killed. So every member of the Khuza'a that was killed, you need to pay blood money. Whether you take it from Banu Bakr, whether you get it from, we don't care where you get it from. You personally, Quraysh, you will pay for the damages of the Khuza'a. That was a huge amount. I mean, one person is 100,000 camels. Dozens of people being killed. This is more than the Quraysh can afford. Quraysh can't afford to pay this. Or Quraysh, if you're not going to pay the price of this battle, then break your alliance with the Banu Bakr. Break your treaty with them, and we will go to war with the Banu Bakr and we'll punish them. Right? So either you pay the damages, you make right what the Banu Bakr did, or you distance yourself from Banu Bakr. You say, look, we had nothing to do with these guys. They did it on their own. Although the Quraysh was fully aware of this. In fact, the Quraysh supported the Banu Bakr in their fight against the Khuza'a. Banu Bakr would not have done this without the permission of the Quraysh. It's almost like Israel and the United States. It is your ally. They would not have gone without permission of Big Brother. And so the Prophet is saying to the Quraysh, you break your alliance with the Banu Bakr, and we will go and punish them on behalf of the Khuza'a. And if you don't do either of these two, you either do one of them. If you don't, then Hudaybiyah is not and void. And then you've broken the treaty. And if you broke the treaty, then we tear the treaty up and we go back to war. On all fronts, the Quraysh are not going to do either of that. The Quraysh can't afford to pay damages. The Quraysh will not break their treaty with Banu Bakr. These are their allies. They also agree with him on religious grounds. So the Quraysh are very short of allies and friends, and so they're not going to sell out one of their friends. So what they decide to do is they send their leader, Abu Sufyan, the chief of the Quraysh, go to Medina and basically say, look, we're not going to pay for the blood money, we're not going to bake off for the Banu Bakr, but please, let's find a solution. We don't want to break Hudaybiyah either. He's trying to pacify the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And Abu Sufyan comes to Medina and he goes to the Prophet Sallallahu, and the Prophet Sallallahu refuses to even acknowledge him. Abu Sufyan, you basically have three options. The ball is in your court. You either pay the damages, or allow us to punish the Banu Bakr, or the treaty is over. And he's adamant, I don't want to break the treaty. I can't do 1 and 2. I can't We can't afford to pay the damages. And we can't sell our own ally out. We can't allow that to happen either. If we did that, it will be a diplomatic catastrophe for us. And as for the treaty, well, we don't want to go back to war. And so he is begging the Nabi Sallam, and the Prophet Sallam is refusing any kind of leeway. He's not budging on this. In fact, he doesn't speak to him. Then Abu Sufyan goes to Abu Bakr, and Abu Bakr is very point blank with him. Whatever the Prophet Sallam goes, don't try to make me negotiate on your behalf. What the Prophet says, Abu Bakr is black and white. If the Prophet says jump, I say oh hi. So I don't have an opinion. The Prophet's opinion is my opinion. Okay. He then goes to Sayyidina Umar, and Sayyidina Umar is almost like sarcastic with him. He says, remember, Umar is not even in favor of Hudaybiyah. So he's saying, you coming to me? If it was up to me, I would arrest you here and basically kill you. You like, in my mind, you're a criminal. We shouldn't even have a treaty with you. I'm the wrong person to come to. You're barking up the wrong tree, guy. And so also it's amazing that he goes to Abu Bakr and Umar. Abu Sufyan understands fully what the leadership, who's in charge, the Prophet ﷺ, and who's first and second in command. Abu Sufyan then tries, really, it's desperation. He goes to his long time daughter, which he hasn't seen. Remember, we said that one of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ was Habiba, who had been living in Abyssinia all these years. Ramla, the daughter of Abu Sufyan, she hasn't seen her dad in maybe 15 years. She was married to the Prophet ﷺ. She was in Abyssinia, and she came back with Ja'far to Medina. And so now he goes to visit his daughter that he hasn't seen in all these years, and he's trying to see if he can use her. You are the wife of Muhammad. Can you speak to him on my behalf? And when he goes to visit her, she doesn't even allow him to sit on the musalla or the cushion of the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He said, you najis, Dad, you najis. That you are not fit, you are not befitting to sit on the Prophet's cushion because you are not clean. And he realizes that, look, he's not going to get anywhere with the Sahaba. That if the Prophet says, this is the way we're going to go, then that's the way we're going to go. So now Abu Sufyan returns to Mecca completely dismayed. He didn't make any progress with the Muslims. He doesn't really know what is the status. Is Hudaybiyah still intact, not intact? And he's basically waiting to see what's going to happen. But he does not expect any kind of immediate action from the Muslims. So in his mind, well, look, things are bad. Hudaybiyah is on the rocks, but we're not yet broken. And the Prophet said to him clearly, you either pay the retributions or you punish Banu Bakr, or Hudaybiyah is done. Abu Sufyan said, we're not going to do one or two. Okay, Prophet leaves it at that. So now the Prophet, peace be upon him, goes into a full kind of media blackout. He doesn't tell anybody what's he going to do. So everybody's waiting. What are you going to do? Are you going to attack the Banu Bakr? Are you going to invade Mecca? Or is Hudaybiyah over? No one knows what's going to happen. In fact, the Huza'a are becoming agitated and saying like, you're not doing anything. So in their minds, the Prophet ﷺ is doing nothing. And the Prophet ﷺ does a very strange thing. He calls an army of 80 men, a battalion, and he sends them north. He sends them north. Sort of in the region, perhaps you could say in the region of the Ghassanids. And so Mecca is south, the Banu Bakr is south, but he sends this army north. And so to everybody's surprise, the Prophet ﷺ is sending an army north of Medina, and no one knows what this is. Meanwhile, and so he gathers the army, and he gathers an army, and he sends the first battalion north. So everybody thinks the army is going north. And then when it's in the month of Ramadan. So this is about 2 months, or the month after the Banu Bakr had killed the Huza'a or attacked the Huza'a. It's in Ramadan of the 8th year of the Hijrah. The Prophet ﷺ gets an army together. He sends a detachment north, and then he takes the rest of the army and he moves south very quickly without telling anybody. He doesn't inform any of the general Sahaba, where are we going? He says, let's go south. So now the army had no idea where they were going, but it's on the route towards Mecca. It's on the route towards Mecca. And so the Muslims were, and so the Prophet ﷺ really, again, a master tactician, he manages to move his army very quickly south of Medina, and he's on his way to Mecca. And this would be the army that would eventually arrive and capture Mecca. An interesting event occurs along the way. Now, one of the soldiers, when they actually put 2 and 2 together, so now by now the Muslims put 2 and 2 together, this army is going to Mecca, it's going to invade Mecca. One of the companions, Sahaba, his name is Hatib ibn Abi Balta'. Hatib he sends a message to Makkah that the Muslims are coming, or we are coming and we're going to invade Makkah. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, of course wanted to keep this completely secret. The Prophet says to Ali, Ali, there is a lady with a message to go into the Quraysh to inform them about us. Intercept her and bring the letter back. And Sayyidina Ali charges along the road and he finds this lady. And so when Sayyidina Ali captures this lady, he says to her, hand over the letter. And the lady says, I have no letter. And Sayyidina Ali says, the one who told me is telling the truth. So there is a letter. And if you are not going to give the letter, I'm going to undress you. I'm going to strip you naked. Because you definitely have a letter. The Nabi said so. And eventually, no matter how much she protested, she eventually gave up, and she, in her hair, in her braids, she had like braids, the letter, the note was inside, and it was a message from Hatib to the Quraysh, to Abu Sufyan, that the Muslims are coming. So the Prophet ﷺ calls Hatib. Hatib is a Sahabi. And he says to Hatib, why would you do this? Why would you inform the enemies about our coming? I'm trying to keep this a secret. Why would you give away our plan? And Hatib says, Ya Rasulullah, there's no question that I know you are the truth, you are the Prophet, and there's no love for kufr over Islam. Muslim, I'm with the Muslims. However, my family is in Mecca, and my family is under their sort of mercy. So his family is being detained by the people of Mecca, and he kind of has an agreement with the Quraysh that if ever the Muslims were to invade Mecca, he will inform them, take care of my family. So my family is under your mercy, don't harm them, and if it would happen, I'll give you information. And I felt very comfortable, Hatib is saying, I felt very comfortable to do this because I knew no matter what I do, Allah will grant you victory. So in his mind, I'm sending the letter. It will have no consequence because Allah is going to protect the Prophet. The Muslims are going to win. Sayyidina Umar stands there and Sayyidina Umar is like, really? This is your excuse? That there will be no consequences? Ya Rasulullah, this guy is a munafiq. Let me cut off his. Just give me the green light to execute this man right here. And the Prophet says to Sayyidina Umar, leave him. For don't you know that Hatib was at Badr? Hatib was with them at Badr. And would it not, do you not know that Allah has already forgiven the sins of the people of Badr, their past and their future sins? So Hatib made a big mistake, but you had done Badr, and in that Allah has given you forgiveness. So go, Hatib, go. And subhanAllah, really when you look at the Prophet, this is the height of there's no great, in all nations on earth, what Hatib had done, he would be arrested for life or he'd be killed for treason. To tell the enemy, we're coming to invade you. This is like the height of treason. But, and sometimes we look at someone that commits a sin, and they might do a major sin, zina, whatever it is, but we forget a lifetime of good deeds. And in the calculus of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah sees the good, the bad, the ugly. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks at your innermost self. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may value a good deed that you've done, as small and trivial in our eyes, and He will forgive and grant you Jannah. And this is the beauty of Islam, that we will not enter Jahannam any more than we deserve in terms of our sins. Allah will not give us more punishment than what we have done. He may forgive us. We may have done so much sin, He will not give us punishment more than that. He may forgive and give us no punishment. But if you do a deed, Allah can take that deed and He can love it so much, whether it is to give a dog water like the prostitute. She had a horrible life, but she gave a dog water, and Allah so much loved that deed that He entered her into Jannah. And so Hatib made a major mistake, but he did one great deed of Badr, and so he is forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nonetheless, the army moves on, and in complete secrecy, the Muslims arrive basically on the footsteps of Mecca, an army of 10,000 men. SubhanAllah, how huge this army is now. Look at again the sizes. An army of 10,000 men arrives almost secretly on the footsteps of Mecca, and they march towards conquering Mecca. We'll continue inshallah next episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.